Welcome to the Soul Anarchist Podcast.
To the Soul Anarchist Podcast.
To the Soul Anarchist Podcast.
A show about living life
on your own terms.
A show about living life on your own terms.
And here's your host,
Paul DeWayne.
Brothers, sisters, and everyone in between, welcome to the show. My name is Paul, and I'm your host. Today we're talking music. We're going to be speaking with one of the up-and-coming stars in the world of progressive house music. What is progressive house music? Progressive house music features steady, danceable beats, lush chord progressions, synth-driven soundscapes, and it often features beautiful ethereal vocals and non-electronic instruments. It's a very interesting mix of things. I would say the key characteristic of progressive house music is that it takes me on a soulful journey that is not only easy to dance to, but it's like kind of hard not to dance to it. I love it so much. Our guest today, Hausman, also known as Devon Ausman, is a gifted producer and songwriter and a master of these sonic journeys. Today, we're going to sit down and talk with him about how the pandemic actually helped him launch his career, his love of progressive rock and artists like Steven Wilson and Porcupine Tree, and a cool trick for DJs who like to mix in key but have found themselves in a tight spot in their mix. During the show, he shares 3 songs with us that have a special significance, and you're going to be able to listen to those tracks by visiting the show notes at soulanarchist.com. So if you haven't gone to the show notes for the episode yet, go there now so you can have the full interview experience. And I'll also include a link to my previous interview with Steven Wilson, this musician that he and I both love so much. Without any further ado, I give you Hausman. First of all, you just recently moved to Denver.
That's right. Yeah, we've been here for about 2 months now.
Oh, what inspired the move?
Well, a lot of things. So we were in Boise, Idaho before.
Right.
We moved there when the pandemic hit, and we were there for about 2 years. And we moved there because my family lived there. They've been there for like 7 years or something. And so it was just nice to be close to family, especially while we were locked down. But we quickly realized, like, once things started opening up again, it doesn't have the best music scene. And I just wasn't getting like the traction with shows and everything that I was hoping for. So yeah. We've been planning to move to Denver for a while. It was one of a couple cities that we visited, and we're trying to figure out where to go. And we just fell in love with it, made a lot of really good friends. And of course, the music scene here is incredible. I think we've been to at least one show every week since we moved here. So it's definitely very different from Boise in that regard. But I mean, it's got great nature, and we've already got a bunch of friends here. So yeah, we're just so happy to finally be here.
So Denver is a fun city.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And I wondered, when I first started following you, I saw that you were in Boise, and I wondered, like, is there a scene up there that I don't know about?
Yeah. I mean, we were kind of building up the scene, honestly.
Yeah.
Like I was kind of a big part of building up the trance and progressive scene there. There was a promoter there who actually lived in Denver beforehand, and she moved back to Boise and reached out to me, and we started doing a club series there. And it was starting to really gain some traction by the end. We had Spencer Brown out, which was a pretty big name and a big show for the city. But after 2 years, like, it just was a little bit too slow.
Right.
So I was happy to be there and help them out while I was there. But moving to Denver, it's just going to be so much more lucrative for my career, I think, at this point. So
yeah, great city. I always have so much
For
fun
sure.
when I go there. So where's home for you originally?
So I'm kind of from all over. I was born in Texas and then lived in St. Louis for a bit. Then we went to Oklahoma.
Gotcha.
And I was in Oklahoma for like the majority of like my teenage years in high school. And then after that, I took a year off, stayed in Oklahoma, just saved up some money, and then went to Boston and went to Berklee for 4 years there, lived
Right.
there for another year after that, then went to Boise, and now I'm here in Denver. So I've been everywhere.
Gotcha. So your time at Berklee piqued my curiosity. So what's your, tell me a little bit more about your musical upbringing, because I'm guessing you probably started playing something when you were young. And so, where does music start for you?
I started on piano. My parents had this old keyboard, and I when I was really, really young, was just messing around on it, like coming up with like really basic songs. But my parents saw something in that and wanted to get me lessons, so they signed me up, and I started doing that. And that was really it up until middle school. And then that's when I joined a percussion program, and I started playing marimba, snare drum, like all the percussion stuff for a high school band, and then just kept honing my skills with that. Eventually picked up drum set lessons and then guitar lessons later in high school. And yeah, I was really like pretty heavily an instrumentalist back in high school and the first few years of college. And so I was really into like rock music, specifically progressive rock.
Okay, which bands? I'm curious. I'm a prog rock guy too.
So I saw you name drop Steven Wilson in the list of people that you've interviewed, and he is probably my number one biggest inspiration of all time.
So by any chance,
everything.
Are you a Rush fan?
Yeah. A bit. I'm into the more like modern progressive stuff.
Gotcha.
I mean, that Rush was probably a bit before my time, although I am into Pink Floyd for sure. But yeah, I'd say the ones that come to mind for me are like Pink Floyd, Porcupine Tree, Riverside. Those are the progressive rock bands that I really am into.
Yeah. Did you get a chance to catch the Porcupine Tree show when they came to Denver?
No, I didn't. I wish I could, but with the whole move to Denver, it's a pretty tough financial situation. So we're like kind of trying to take it easy.
Yeah, choose your shows
going
wisely.
To all these shows.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, definitely.
It's funny. I actually had the opportunity to see Porcupine Tree back before they split up. It was before I really got into them. My mom was going to go, and she was a huge fan. She was like, "Oh, you've got to go." And I was like, "Nah, I'm not into their music."
Your mom's a Porcupine Tree fan?
Oh yeah.
That's so
she's
great.
Probably a bigger fan than I am.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Oh, how fun. I can't imagine my mom being a Porcupine Tree fan. That'd be amazing. But
well, I have to say, like, my parents are a huge reason why I like the music that I do. Like they were into like electronic music back in like the 90s, like with Tangerine Dream and Robert Miles and all that stuff. And so they really introduced me to that. And that's something that has really like honed my tastes. And so it's really awesome because now that I'm making this music, they can really appreciate it. And it's like they're really ingrained in what I'm doing, and they understand it a lot more than I think a lot of parents might. So it's a really
that's really cool. So because this was one of my questions for you, was there ever a point where you hit any resistance in moving into a full-time music career from your family or friends? Because a lot of artists do, but I'm kind of anticipating that you got a lot of support, it sounds like.
Oh, it's all been support. Like my parents couldn't be more supportive, like they,
oh, that's brilliant.
Yeah, it's really awesome. And, like going to music full time was more of like a necessity than like a desire, because I started doing it at the start of COVID. So I just had to find a way to make ends meet. But, they have always been supportive of it. I mean, they sent me to Berklee, and, they couldn't really afford it. So they really like believed in me. And
yeah. So for those who are listening that don't fully appreciate what Berklee is, will you, the way I've talked about it to other people is it's kind of like an Ivy League of music education. Would that be a fair comparison?
Probably. Yeah.
Okay.
It's definitely got like a name for itself. Like people who in the music industry hear Berklee and they're like, oh, like
you're legit.
This person knows what they're doing.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So it's got that going for it for sure. I'd say my experience was kind of a mixed bag, and I think that's probably true for most people.
Your experience at Berklee?
What I've always said, At Berklee, yeah.
Okay.
Like, but what I've always said is it takes a very specific type of person to succeed at Berklee. And I'm not sure if I'm that type of person. You've got to be like ridiculously outgoing, very, very good at networking. You've got to have a crazy work ethic. And, you know, like I can kind of pretend to be all of those things, but, you know, I felt like I didn't get as much out of the Berklee experience as I think I could have. And so there were definitely like a really, really good parts. I don't think I'd be where I am today if I didn't go. But at the same time, there's a lot of stuff that I think I could have taken more advantage of.
So at what point did it become clear to you that you wanted to, get serious about music and go to Berklee as opposed to like, the local state university music program? Right.
Well, in Oklahoma, there wasn't really a big music program aside from performance, just being in the college marching band. That
Sure.
was pretty much the main thing you do. So I discovered during my senior year that I was really interested in production specifically. And I actually wrote and recorded like an entire progressive rock album during the summer before my senior year at high school. Just kind of like to set a goal for myself and complete it and see how I enjoyed the experience. And I just fell in love with the whole process. And shortly after that is when I discovered electronic music and started to mess around in FL Studio and make my own music that way. So what I started doing was looking for production programs. And of course, Berklee has a great one, but I was also looking at a college in Michigan. I'm forgetting exactly which one, but there's one there that has a really good production program. I was looking at one in Washington, but when Berklee accepted me, like I wasn't going to say no to that.
Yeah, that's game over there.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, that's very cool. So you're talking about like some kind of pros and cons to your experience at Berklee. What were some of the high points from that?
Sure. So I would say I got really lucky. I think that my girlfriend also went to Berklee, or my fiance actually. We recently got engaged.
Congratulations!
And thank you. We did the whole Berklee experience together, and so while I was having like a really, really good experience for the most part, like really solid teachers, really interesting courses, I was in the right major the entire time. So I was like happy to be there all the time and really into the stuff that I was learning. She didn't have that same experience. She didn't have the best teachers. And there were a lot of classes that she just wasn't really into and got kind of burned out. And so that's where I'd say there's like, it really depends on what teachers specifically you get as to what your experience is going to be. So yeah, I'd say I got lucky. I loved my teachers. They taught me some really, really great things. I'd say my major was probably a little bit on the easier side of things as opposed to some of the other majors. But at the same time, I still learned so much, and maybe it was easier because I was really passionate about it as well.
I love that. You said something earlier about COVID creating a situation where making a go of music was a necessity.
Mm-hmm.
I found that really interesting. Could you unpack that a little bit more?
Sure. Yeah. So I was, I've been in food service for pretty much my entire like work experience, up until the pandemic hit. And so, of course, when that happened, all the restaurants were closed.
Right.
There's nothing I could do except collect unemployment and try to figure out how to make ends meet. So I started kind of looking into what some other like full-time producers were doing, and tried to sort of build up a brand for myself. And so there were a couple of different avenues that I took. The first one was with like tutoring sessions and music production for clients, mastering services, stuff like that. But then the next avenue that's really blown up and been kind of like a catapult for my career is getting in the Twitch community and starting to DJ on Twitch. And so I've been doing that. I still do that. I stream 3 to 4 times a week to an audience of between like 70 and 100 people each stream. And that's paying my rent. So that's been like huge in order for me to just be able to support myself and continue to do this full time. And not only that, but it's also catapulted my career, and that so many people have discovered me on Twitch. I built up this community of people that I now go to live shows, and I see people that pull me aside and say, hey, I've been following you on Twitch for like 2 years. And it's so cool to be able to connect with these people like that and build this community. So that was probably, like, a lot of people say that the pandemic, like, you know, really hit them hard financially, but for me, like, it was kind of amazing for my career, like just being stuck at home, streaming all the time, doing all of these client projects and forcing myself to do this full time and figure out how to do it. And so at this point, I think I figured that out.
That's brilliant.
So it's cool to be in a good spot with it.
You know, some of my favorite things about the pandemic, it's probably a sentence you're not going to hear too much, but
Sure.
You know, it was so cool to see what other musicians were doing to keep their art and their craft going. And like Ben Bomer did some like really cool performances. I loved seeing what Circle was doing on their with their artists, all these. And for those who are listening, what we're referring to here are different DJs and producers that would go out and film these sets in the most beautiful locations you can imagine. And they were just gorgeously produced, and it was just eye and ear and soul candy. And I don't think that would have happened without the lockdown.
No, definitely not. It wouldn't have become such a widespread and like something that people put so much time into, you know. We actually did like a location set like that
up in Boise, right?
Just this past year. Yeah, we did it in Boise, and it got uploaded to the Monster Cat channel and everything.
Yep.
And
that's how I saw that.
An amazing experience to put that together. Yeah.
Very cool. So there's a little nuance here that I'm still kind of fascinated by that I may have missed. So before the pandemic, your whole Hausman DJ producer thing was not a thing. Is that correct?
I would say it wasn't like a big thing. So I always kind of did it as a hobby.
Okay.
So like I officially started it in 2013. That's when I started working on electronic music.
Right.
And I had my first release in, I think it was 2016. That was on Intricate Records. And, you know, it was a small label at the time. My releases did okay. But I started to get some decent support the following year. I think I got a triple play from Above and Beyond on Group Therapy, which was really huge.
Oh, that had to feel good.
And it was crazy. I forgot that the radio show was happening, and then I got a notification on my phone that they played it, and I had been religiously following Group Therapy for years at that point.
Right.
So that blew my mind. But yeah, so it was all kind of slow going. You know, while I was at Berklee, I was also working, so I didn't have like the most time to actually produce music. I would do it in my spare time as a hobby, but it wasn't really something I was putting full energy into. And so when the pandemic hit, I put 100% of my energy into it, started building up the brands and stuff, and Twitch helped. And, you know, here I am today, like with a solid fan base and community. And it's crazy. I would not have expected that.
So the Hausman we know now is largely a product of those 2 years of lockdown.
Definitely.
Oh, that's so cool. I love that. That's such a cheery story.
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of good stuff that came out of it for me, and I mean, it's kind of weird. It's kind of an odd situation to be in, because obviously it's a dark time for the world as a whole, but
right.
You know, at the same time, I have to recognize the positives that have come out of it, at least for me.
Yeah,
so
love that. Okay, so another question for you. So you know, your life has been saturated with music, and you have this supportive family and all these things, and you have had this great educational opportunity. is there a version of reality where you did something else? Like, do you have other interests that you think like, man, if I could live 200 years, I'd do this other career that's unrelated to music? Is there such a thing for you?
Well, there's other things that I wanted to do when I was in high school. Before I was like really, really passionate about music. I was always really, really good at math. And I think it was also something I enjoyed to an extent. So I think that's something that at one point I could have seen myself doing. I had this vision of being a math teacher for a while, but when Berklee accepted me, like that just went out the window.
Sure.
And I don't know if I necessarily have the same sort of like drive to do something like that as opposed to music, because music is just something that I just do. And I think if I was doing something else, I would still be making music just because it's something that I love so much. And I'm not really sure if there's anything else like that. The only thing I can really think of is I really like video games, so getting into some game design of some kind could be really cool. But I don't know if it scratches that same itch.
But you don't sit around solving equations for fun at night.
No, and I never did. It was just something I really excelled at.
Yeah.
So I was like, maybe this should be a career. But yeah, there goes that.
Fantastic. Let's talk some more music. You mentioned Steven Wilson being a big influence for you. Who are some of your other favorites?
So going back to like my progressive rock and alternative rock influences, Steven Wilson, Porcupine Tree, Mute Math is a huge one.
Oh, I love Mute Math so much. Yeah.
Right?
Oh.
Yeah, that first album is legendary.
So good.
And it's something that it's an album I always come back to. I have to listen to it in full at least once a year.
Have you ever seen them play live?
It's just a masterpiece. Oh yeah, a bunch of times.
Same.
And the drummer blew my mind every time.
Darren was amazing. Yeah,
I was so sad when they broke up. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. I'm a fan of some other great bands. Like Steven Wilson and Rush and some of these guys, and so I say this carefully, but I don't think there's a better live band than Mute Math. Their bands are as good as Mute Math, but nobody plays better than they do live. It's incredible.
Right? Yeah, their energy is insane. I think the first time I saw them was at a place in Oklahoma, and Paul, the lead singer, ended up in the rafters, like just climbing around. I don't know how he got up there, but that was a highlight. And one of the other times I saw them, they threw a mattress out into the crowd, and he was on the mattress, and they were like moving him around. It's just, you don't get that energy from everyone. So yeah, they're a huge influence. And I still follow Paul and everything that he does. So
I was
a big one. Coldplay, of course.
Oh, they're so good too.
Oh, I was just going to list off some more.
Oh, yeah. I have another Mute Math comment to make in a second,
okay.
But yeah, rattle off a couple more of your faves here.
Yeah, so Coldplay, definitely their older stuff, like the soft rock type stuff. Really, really enjoyed that. If we're getting into like electronic music, Deadmau5 was probably the first artist that I heard with the progressive house style. Of course, Above and Beyond and everything on Engine Beats really sort of curated my tastes when I was first getting into it. And these days, I'm into a lot of like smaller DJs at this point, because I really like to see the people that are experimenting with new stuff. So like Alex Sonata and the Rio is one that comes to mind. Movement Machina, Morgan Madison. But yeah, they're all like kind of like mid-tier DJs, which are the DJs that I like really, really kind of gravitate towards these days.
Very cool.
So
I'll have to check them out. Speaking of like Mute Math and Paul Meany, I was listening. Have you ever heard of the Blue Stones?
The Blue Stones. I've heard of Ilan Bluestone, but I haven't heard of the Blue Stones.
So Ilan Blue, very different. I love him too.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah. So Blue Stones they're kind of a bluesy rock guitar singer, guitarist, singer, and drum duo from Canada, and I got introduced to them, and I was listening to them and thought, man, these guys remind me so much of Mute Math. Turns out Paul Meany produced them, and his fingerprints are all over it. You might dig it.
Yeah, I'll have to check that out. The Blue Stones. Well, I won't forget that.
Yeah.
Cool.
So right on. So tell me a little bit more about your genre and like what draws you to it. What do you love about deep and progressive house?
Sure. So progressive house is, it's all about the journey, and the track. So the first progressive house album I ever heard was Dead Mouse Random Album Title. That one is a legendary album, and the thing that drew me to it is the continuous nature of it. All the tracks blend into each other. It's just one continuous DJ mix, essentially. And it was the first time not quite the first time I had heard anything like that. The first time was actually Daft Punk's Alive 2007. And that mix album blew my mind. Just pulling all of the different songs and mashing them up all together and creating this progressive journey. But yeah, so the Dead Mouse one was the first like studio album that was a continuous mix that I'd ever heard. And that blew me away. And that's something that I still do today is I put a ton of time into my radio shows and my mix shows and making sure that they all have really tight, like intentional transitions and it's not just like each track is a journey, but the entire mix is a journey. So that's what draws me to progressive house is creating something that will take the listener on a journey through, contrasting types of sounds, like maybe a really melodic breakdown and then a really hard hitting groove section. And of course, as I've become more of a DJ than a producer, I'm also keeping the dance floor in mind and trying to craft something that I think will hit effectively well on the dance floor and create that unique experience for the people that are there at the club.
That's very interesting. I mean, it makes perfect sense, being a Porcupine Tree fan, that you love these big journeys. And again, listeners, if you don't know who Porcupine Tree is, think Tool meets Pink Floyd meets the Beach Boys. That's how Steven Wilson described it. And,
oh man, that's a great way to describe it.
Yeah. And they're famous for big, long soundscapes, like their music takes you someplace and there's many movements to it. And so it's interesting that that's your sensibility when you come to progressive house music.
Yep. There's a lot of parallels between those two genres, and I always come back to that. And I'll often listen back to Porcupine Tree songs like today and notice like these chords are really similar to this like progressive house track, or maybe this breakdown is really similar to something in a Steven Wilson song. Or maybe like a vocal melody is really similar. Like there's a lot of parallels that I think kind of a lot of people might not recognize as easily because there's a lot of differences too. But
for sure,
I think the same thing draws me to both genres at least.
Progressive rock is known for being very technical.
Yeah,
lots of notes, lots of key changes, lots of time signature changes, things like that. And deep house is not.
Right.
It's
very, very formulaic.
Yes, it's formulaic, kind of like the blues. In fact, it kind of reminds me of that because there's a form to it, in terms of song structures, but it's 4 on the floor, repetitive chord structures, simple melodies. So have you ever wondered, like, why is it that on the one hand, I love all this really complex music, but then on the other hand, I love this very simple music? Like,
Sure.
How does that meet up for you?
It's a weird one, because when I was listening to progressive rock music pretty much exclusively, I was one of those people that kind of viewed EDM through this lens of like, well, this doesn't take as much talent. And it was discovering the Dead Mouse album and the Anjuna Beats mix albums that made me realize like, wait, there's more to this. There's a lot of emotion in this. There's a lot of like intentional choices made here, and also there's a lot of like really, really intricate details in these simplistic tracks. They seem simplistic to someone who is hearing it for the first time, like, oh, it's just a kick playing over and over again and maybe like a bass drum or a bass note playing off of it. But there's a lot more to it than that. And as I've like listened to more music and made more productions, I've just added more and more details into my own productions that I am hearing from other producers that just have ridiculously detailed productions. So I'd say one of my favorite, well, no, my absolute all-time favorite producer is Matt Zoe, and he, I think, is a perfect way to kind of bridge the gap between progressive rock and EDM, because he doesn't care about genres. He makes whatever he wants within EDM, and it always slaps. So I think that is probably the perfect sort of crossover there.
Matt Zoe.
Because Matt Zoe, yeah. If you haven't heard of him,
I'm for sure checking him out tonight.
Listen to absolutely everything he's done.
Okay,
yeah,
for sure. Yeah, we have
cool
enough
stuff.
similar taste. I'm certain that there's going to be something good in there for me.
Definitely. Yeah, he's also got some rock influences as well, and you can really hear that in a lot of his tracks. I know he records live drum set for a bunch of his own stuff, which is really neat.
That sounds cool.
Yeah,
I love that. I've long been curious about like creating house music, but with real instruments.
Yep. Yeah, and I do that every once in a while. I like to put guitar chords in my tracks sometimes, like the really lush, like acoustic guitar, very Porcupine Tree-esque.
Yeah.
And I've always wanted to put marimba in my tracks because that was my principal instrument at Berklee. But of course I don't have a marimba. So if I did, I would absolutely be putting that in probably every
the day will
track,
come.
Honestly. Hope so.
You'll do it.
Yeah.
Oh, that'll be so cool. So let's talk about some of your favorite songs.
Sure.
I asked you previously to kind of be thinking about some of this. So
yeah.
First of all, what song is on repeat in your world right now?
Right now, yeah. So this one, I was looking through some of my playlists, and I scrolled past this one and immediately knew this is the one. So Breaking Down Walls by Joda, which is the brainchild of John O'Grant and Darren Tate. And this album, it's just self-titled, called Joda, it just like transports you back to the 80s and 90s sort of synthwave, retro wave style stuff. And I'm a huge fan of that style, but what really sells this album is the songwriting. All of the like melodies are just ridiculously catchy. I love the chords that they use, and of course the production is top notch because these guys have been in the industry for so long. And I will say I wasn't expecting to like the album as much as I did. I was expecting to give it a listen through and be like, meh, but it's probably the top album this year for me. It's like I've had it on repeat and I can't get enough of these tracks.
So we're going to talk about a couple more songs, but to the listeners, again, I'm going to put links to all these songs in the show notes for today's episode. So if you're just listening to this, go over to the show notes at soulanarchist.com, and I'm going to have links to each of his songs that he's mentioning. And while we're on the topic of this song, like, what's the one thing that grabs your ear that keeps you coming back? Like, oh, I want to hear that again. That little detail is so beautiful.
It's the combination of the chord progression and the specific melody that Jono is singing. Also, his voice is just smooth like butter. So good. But yeah, for me, like what always catches my ear with songs is the chord progression, as opposed to the melody. And the chords in that one is just right up my alley.
Nice. Yeah, can't wait to hear it.
It's a good one.
So our next one, if a movie were made about your life, what song plays during the opening credits?
Right. Yeah. So this was a tough question, because I think that the question kind of implies that there's, some like lyrical meaning to it. And that's tough for me because I don't listen to lyrics very much. I'm very much sort of an instrumental kind of guy. There are so many songs that I like absolutely love, and they might be my favorite song, and I have no idea what the lyrics are.
Right.
So I had to kind of like dig a little bit deeper with this question, and I did end up finding one where, you know, I saw it and was like, immediately, these lyrics actually do mean something to me, and I love the music as well. So the song is "The Sunshine of Your Youth" by Cheerleader. And it really, really resonates with me because I'm a really sentimental person. I find myself, you know, thinking back to like the days of my youth, I guess, like in high school and college. I think back to those times with kind of like rose tinted glasses a lot, and always am kind of reminiscing about it. And that song, just when I first heard it, it was one of the few songs where I was listening to the lyrics already, like the first time through, and it just resonated with me. So yeah, I'd say that one is probably a good one. And it also, you know, applies to a lot of the music that I make today. There's a lot of stuff that I'm working on right now that's very reminiscing. It's all about like calling back to my early influences and kind of showing the journey that I've taken to get to where I am today.
Love that. Very sentimental. Yeah, I can hear that. And what's one song in your own catalog that's the undiscovered gem? You know, that one song you know is great, but for some reason people skip past it.
Sure. Yeah, so that one was a no-brainer for me. It's the third track on my debut EP on Silk. It's called Enmity. And that one, you know, everyone who really likes it specifically mentions that it's a hidden gem, because it seems like a lot of people just don't know it exists. It's of the 4 tracks on that EP, it's the most underplayed one. But for me, it was my first time venturing into like a really, really dark, edgy sort of sound. And it's that song in particular really kind of defined a lot of what I'm doing today with the darker, sort of like gritty, techno inspired stuff, while maintaining that like progressive house like journey and all of the like lush chords, despite having this like really gritty driving groove section. So yeah, that's one that has always been a personal favorite for me, at least from the music side of things. Listening back to it, of course, I feel like the mix down could probably be better, but you know, that's always going to happen.
I think that's common for artists. I mean, we do the best we can with the tools we have at the time. And you know, like I'm a photographer, and I often will look back at images and go, man, I mean, I love what I was going for there, but exactly. I see some technical limitations I didn't know how to overcome at the time. And it sounds like that same thing for you.
Yeah, that's an exact parallel. Like I'll listen back to my like first productions, and you know, I'll love the musical ideas and absolutely hate what I like, how I tried to execute it essentially. So, but yeah, that's definitely a very common feeling for artists.
Do you ever think you'll go back and like rewrite them, re-record them, reapproach any of those old ideas, or do you just want to let them be as they are?
Depends on the idea. Some of the like really, really early ones that just are not at all like in a releasable state, those ones I would probably revisit and, you know, just pull the chord progression, maybe pull a melody, and then rebuild everything else. But some of the ones that are kind of in like the middle of my production journey, those are ones that I probably wouldn't ever want to touch.
Like you can live with them
because they're kind of, yeah, well, I can live with them, but they're like the faults are kind of what makes it good in a sense.
Oh, okay. Or
I guess it kind of defines my journey. Like I can look back on it and be like, this sound is what was popular in the industry at the time, and it wouldn't work today. And if I tried to update it, I'm not sure I could do it as effectively as I did at the time.
Gotcha. Yeah, that makes sense. I think there's something to that, to being able to be, you know, kind of proud of a piece of your work, because it is a statement of where you're at, and it gets to stand on its own at that point.
Right.
I have a couple of other questions for you to kind of shop talk a little bit. You said something earlier about your love of taking people on a journey as a songwriter, and yet as a DJ, you also have kind of a job to keep the dance floor going. And so do you ever find yourself kind of struggling with that juxtaposition? Because sometimes those journeys mean big, long, spacey breaks and stretched out ideas that you can't dance to them necessarily.
Right.
So how do you reconcile that and kind of come away satisfied on both fronts?
Yeah. That's something I've learned since I started DJing full time on Twitch. Like before Twitch, I hated the idea of a DJ friendly intro and outro, like just drums in the beginning and at the end, like that just felt lazy to me. And so most of my releases before I started DJing a lot, you'll notice there's a lot of melodic elements in the intro. Everything is, very, very intentional, like from a music standpoint and like a overall like journey standpoint. But the unfortunate reality is the industry demands concessions in this area. Like in order to get support in DJ mixes or at a club, you've got to have that DJ friendly intro and outro.
And
I've noticed an extreme shift. Go ahead.
I was going to say for our listeners that may not be DJs or like kind of understand that, could you unpack why those big, long, just drum only intros and outros are meaningful to DJs?
Yep. Yeah. So when you're DJing, you might have two tracks that are in different keys. And in progressive music, especially, it's really important to mix in key. So, going from one track to a track that's a half step up, it's not going to sound great naturally. And so a DJ friendly intro and outro is no melodic elements. It's just going to be like effects, drums, kick, maybe some like teases of some melodic elements, but nothing too overpowering. Like the absolute the killer for an intro and outro is just a sustained pad or a piano or something, because that's going to make it impossible to mix it effectively with a track that's in a different key.
Right.
So that's something I didn't really fully appreciate until I started DJing more frequently. And so yeah, that's one side of what the industry demands. The other side of it is the age of Spotify and short attention spans of listeners. Everyone wants a radio edit. Playlists will usually not go for an extended mix, things that are longer than 5 minutes, regardless of how complete the piece may be.
Right.
So that's another thing that we as producers unfortunately have to really consider. And so yeah, it's really made an impact on how I approach my productions these days. And I mean I think it's been effective in terms of building up my career more and getting my music out to more listeners. But at the same time, I do really miss those like full pieces of progressive house where every single point is like very intentional in the journey, and you're meant to listen through the extended mix entirely in full. So yeah, it's a tough one.
Yeah. It is kind of funny because like as a listener, I love the tracks that have like a very intentional beginning and there's no fluff to it. You just, the idea is there and it's purity, and we just, I can tell I'm going where the artist wanted to go and we're not screwing around.
Right.
But then as a DJ, like I need those, extended like intros and outros. And yeah, that's a funny thing to have to like consider both.
Yeah. The goal, of course, is to get to the point where you don't have to worry about needing that DJ friendly intro and outro or that radio edit. DJs like Above and Beyond or Spencer Brown, of course, who just put out an 18-minute track or something. He released on his own label. I think it's called 18-minute loop, and it's just 18 minutes, like a whole progressive journey, ambient intro and outro. He doesn't care if it gets support. And that's because, he's reached that point where he doesn't need to worry about it. So it was very much like a statement that he was making there, which I think was cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm not there yet. And, hopefully one day I can be, and I don't have to cave to the demands of the industry, but it is what it is. So.
Right. So speaking of mixing in key, I've got a really nerdy question for you, and I might
Sure.
even edit this out of the podcast because this might not mean much to anybody else. I don't know.
All right.
But do you use the Camelot system or classical notation?
So actually, I don't know the Camelot system, and
Hey.
it always messes me up,
Right, okay.
especially at live shows, because I'm handing over the decks to someone else, and they're like, "What key is this in?" And I say, "Oh, it's in C," and they're like, "What does that mean?" and then I'm like, "I'm sorry, I don't know the Camelot wheel." And
Yeah.
It was funny. One of the guys I was handing the decks off to said, "Well, no, you're the one who knows the right thing.
Right.
I'm the one who should be saying sorry."
And
But
again,
I really should learn the Camelot wheel.
for the listeners, would you briefly explain the difference between the Camelot wheel and like the traditional circle of fifths?
Yep. So traditional circle of fifths is going to be like, your basic piano notes, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Basically, you can reliably go a fourth or a fifth from wherever you're at. So if you're at an A, you can go to a D or an E. And then if you're at an E, you can go to a B or an A, et cetera, et cetera. Camelot wheel basically turns this into a number and letter system. So everything is like 1A, 1B, 2A, 2C. And I think, or no, wait, that's not right. Yeah, I don't know.
You got it right. Yeah.
So,
yeah.
But yeah, essentially it's just like a code to be able to get from one key to another easily. And it's particularly helpful for people who don't necessarily have a musical background.
Right. So this, you mentioned, and this is where it's going to get a little bit nerdy. You can mix like a fourth or a fifth up from where you're at, pretty reliably. But
Yep.
Do you have any? Because there will be times I want to mix further than that. Like I want to jump
Sure.
across the circle of fifths. And are there any tricks that I haven't thought of to make that happen, or is like
So you can obviously fourths and fifths are going to be great.
Yeah.
You can also usually get away with a whole step transition. And you just have to be really careful about, taking out the mid range so that most of the tonality is gone.
So you're basically dealing with the root. Is that what you're saying? Like,
so no, so just being really intentional about making sure you're removing all of the melodic elements from one track,
right.
And then quickly moving them over to the next track.
Okay.
And then removing all of the melodic elements from the other one. So that's one way to do it. Another thing you can do is, say you've got a track in C minor. If the track is just playing the C and it's not actually playing like the minor third or even the G, then you can get away with going to the minor third. So you can go from a C to an E flat at that point. Assuming the track that you're going to doesn't have like a ton of melodic elements in there, and maybe if it's in E flat minor, then it might be playing a G flat, which wouldn't sound great.
Right.
So you have to know the tracks, of course, but you can get away with things like that if the arrangements allow you to do so.
Right. That would take some prep ahead of time to like really understand, make sure you don't have any clashing tones in there.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
that said, when you're prepping your sets, how much do you like really sequence things ahead of time? How much are you just really mixing on the fly, like when you're doing your DJ sets?
Yeah, it depends on the set. For my Twitch sets, when I first started streaming, I was really meticulous about planning everything out. Exactly where I would switch the low end over, and exactly where I would bring the next track in, etc. And it came with practice, like being able to just mix on the fly. But it also, like, a huge thing that really helped with that was getting my organization down. So I have all of my tracks organized into folders by genre, and then within that I have a folder for each key as well. And that has been a game changer for me to be able to just like pull all of my entire library in and just open it up and start playing some tracks. And if I'm in one folder, I know everything in here is going to mix fine. Obviously, I'm going to want to get to another key at some point. So I'll go to the D folder or the E folder, and then something in there is going to be a good transition.
So you'll just stay in one key for a while,
so yeah.
like stay in D minor for a while, and then maybe move over to a folder of A minor for a while, and then.
Yep. And I'm pretty meticulous about going like in order. So I'll go A to D to G to C to F. And I usually don't stray out of that unless like maybe there's not a track in a key that I need, and that's when I'll do that whole step transition if I need to.
I love that. I'm going to try that whole step transition trick one of these days.
It works a lot more often than I would expect it to.
That's golden.
So I would definitely mess around with that.
I love that. Our time's just about up. So just one last question. When you're thinking about this coming year, what's on the docket? What can we look forward to from you?
Hoping to play some more shows. I'm trying to play, the goal is one show a month. And I'm trying to make that happen. Now that I'm in Denver, I've got some leads and, working on getting some things like finalized. But I'm hoping to play at least 3 shows before the year is out. But that's what we've have in the works. Next year, of course, I want to keep up the momentum. I want to play some shows outside of Denver, hopefully. And other than that, I'm just hoping to keep releasing music. I've got a pretty good home on Enhanced right now, for my more hard hitting stuff. So I'm actually working on a larger scale EP with them at the moment. So that'll be really cool to release that. Of course, I'm always shooting for Anjuna, but they're pickier than ever these days. So we'll see if that ends up happening.
It'll totally.
And then
you'll get that.
Monster Cats. We'll see.
Yeah.
Monster Cat Silk is, their sound is shifting a little bit, but I'm sure I'll be back there. They're aiming to go into more of like the chill melodic house space as opposed to the progressive stuff, but I've been toying around with some of that stuff as well. So yeah, just my goal is just to keep making music and keep getting it out to people's ears and hope that they like it. As a heads up, I've got a release coming in October on a label called Masvingo Recordings, which I've been doing some work with as a A&R. And then I've got a remix coming up the following month on Purified. And that's going to be my debut on Purified. So pretty excited about that one.
We'll keep our ears and eyes peeled for that.
Awesome.
Well, hey, I appreciate your time. And
I appreciate you.
Looking forward to hearing your next releases. I've been loving what you've been doing so far.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, sir. Have a great one.
All right. You too.
Talk soon.
Bye.
And there you have it. Devon, thank you so much for your time. It was a fantastic conversation. All right, my friends, if you have enjoyed today's show, share it with a friend. The Soul Anarchist podcast is on Amazon, Apple, Spotify, or any other podcasting app that you enjoy. You can find it there. Or you can just share today's show notes at soulanarchist.com as a link on your favorite social media platform. At any rate, I do appreciate you sharing the show with your friends. Remember to check out the show notes at soulanarchist.com. You're going to find Hausman's 3 songs that he talked about in the podcast, and I'll include a playlist of my favorite Hausman tracks, a primer to Hausman music. Hope you enjoy it. If you do, follow him on all the social media platforms. Follow him on Spotify or your favorite streaming service. And share the love. Share some music with the people that you know that love progressive house music like we do. All right, my friends, I hope you enjoyed today's show. Thanks for hanging out. And until next time.